Discussion today is hidden complexity of NLP and ML products from a product manager perspective. It is hosted on partnership with Grammarly, and we have Elizabeth is not here to host, so I am taking hosting on her behalf. So I'm just going to tell you a bit about myself. I'm Mashal, and I have product management experience of 2+ years, and I've worked on many different B2B and B2C products. And yes, very lucky enough to be working with product people. Why I'm lucky, I'm going to tell you a bit about product people so that you know how awesome product people is in general. So what we do is we help companies discover and deliver great products faster. And we empower our product management community to share knowledge generously. And we do all sort of unglamorous hands-on work of a product manager. And not only that, we onboard very fast, align teams, and deliver outcomes within 2 weeks. Currently, we have 41+ in-house product managers, which are acting as interim product managers with different clients. And we have a community of 17,000 product managers across the globe. So just to know a bit about you, we have 2 questions. You'll see a pop-up on Zoom with the questions, and those who are on the rest of the platforms can simply type the questions in the chat. First question is, are you familiar with Grammarly products? Have you ever used them? Yes or no? It's a single choice question. The second question is, what is your current role? Are you a product manager, designer, software engineer, founder, or any other leadership role? So you have some time, just take a minute or 2 to give the answers. And then we'll see what the answers are and move on from there. Okay, cool. So we have some results. Surprisingly, there are 88% of people who are attending this event who are familiar with Grammarly products. And they say they have also used it as well. So that's a big win for Grammarly. And the people here mostly are product managers. 63% of you guys are product managers, and we have some founders as well, which is pretty cool. Awesome. So moving on to the next slide, we have our guest, Denis, who is a product manager at Grammarly. Denis, welcome to the event, and we're looking forward to see what you have to present. I'll hand over this presentation to Denis. Denis, please be free to share your screen and start the presentation.
Thank you, Mashal, and thank you to product people for having us. It's exciting to connect with broader audience across the globe. Once I get my presentation up, I think once you unshare, we can get back to this slide of the Q&A. It's pretty cool that actually 88% of people know about Grammarly. That's going to save me some time with some of the slides. Mashal, can I please ask you to stop sharing on the Q&A slide? Oh, thanks. Fantastic. And so now we can talk a little bit more about the hidden complexities. This is a pretty important topic that I'm personally passionate about, because I have been pretty new to this whole field of AI and natural language processing and machine learning when I joined the company. And over the years, I had a few experiences working at different projects that helped me learn principles that I try to carry on with me as I go through the rest of the career. So without really bragging, I don't think that I'm an expert at this at all, but I think some of these learnings help me to put the bricks in that foundation that I can refer to every now and then whenever we start a new project or whenever we think about the new idea. So my hope is really that I can kind of pass it on to you And when you will be getting your first hands-on experience with anything that has to do with artificial intelligence, specifically NLP and ML, you'll have some comfort. Like you won't know everything. You'll have to learn by trial and error yourself, but at least you'll have a sort of a visual roadmap in the head of like, what are the milestones that you're going to conquer? I guess we'll have to skip almost this slide because you know about Grammarly, but it's quite exciting that a few people around the world know about how we try to improve lives by improving communication. And it has to do a lot about NLP and ML because we leverage artificial intelligence in our products to surface the most relevant suggestions. And we do it across anywhere you write, be it on a desktop or on mobile. I guess a bit of a context on some of the AI and AI impact and all the products that we built is that we're now helping 30 million users daily. And among those users are 50,000 companies that are working with Grammarly Business. So the applications are pretty wide. This also makes it a little bit harder to look at all the edge cases because it's not just, students or just sales people or recruiters. It's really anybody, anywhere who's writing anything, which takes a bit longer to figure out when you build a product, but it's also not less rewarding for sure. For today, to set some expectations for you, we'll look at the 3 sections, and I hope we'll have 2 takeaways when we end and transfer into the Q&A. So the first thing, I'm going to walk you through a feature that I worked on with the team within our product that is live and that leveraged natural language processing and machine learning. Then, as an example of this feature, I want us to look at the expertise that the product manager, like me as a product manager, had to have in order to move the feature from the idea stage into the release stage and into the maintenance stage. And as a result of this all, we'll have a milestone map of like typical cycle that any product goes through so that when you're starting out your journey of creating a product like this or something that has application of AI, you can have a sense of like what you can expect. And as a result of all of this, I hope you understand those product milestones, but you also have a basic checklist of what you need to look out for as you're building the product, because there are going to be nuances. It's not going to be universal that you can just apply to anything, but some of the blocks will just nudge and help you reflect. So if anything, like I hope after like 45 minutes, you'll have a sense of like self-reflection and you can ask yourself, if I'm working on a similar product or if I will be working on a similar product, is this something that I can apply? And hopefully some of it will, and that will make me really happy. I've been with Grammarly for 3 years now. I think my anniversary is coming up this week or so. And through this time, I've been working on our web editor product that you can see on the right side. And most recently, I had a lot of focus with our design system and product consistency so that whenever you work with Grammarly, you get a sense that it's like one consistent product. And this specifically relevant for our conversation today is that I had a chance to work on a feature that allowed users to accept multiple suggestions at once. And to give you a glimpse of how it works, this is what the feature looks like. So if you've never used our web editor, if you're not familiar with Grammarly, just like a quick 101 is our product helps you communicate better. And one way of doing it is you paste whatever you wrote into the text area that you see on the left, and then we render a number of suggestions that we think will help you make it more clear so that people understand you better, or more engaging so that your audience doesn't lose interest, or just simply correct grammatically and punctuationally. And one of the things that we were working on is helping people with productivity. So this specific feature, as you can see on the right side here, is highlighting a set of suggestions that rely on our ML model to identify what you would likely accept without even thinking or like without spending too much time on. So think of this like giving it to the editor, and as an editor, they tell you, these are the suggestions you should definitely fix. Like, it's non-negotiable that is going to make your writing better. So we were trying to find like, what are the things that we can fix for users immediately so that they can focus on other suggestions that may be up for like debate because their style would differ, or they would like to phrase it differently, and things like that. And this is where it brings me to the first point is you kind of always have to start with the best practices, regardless if it's a cool and shiny AI and everybody's talking about it and the industry is hyping the whole discussion about it. You still need to know about the problem that you want to solve for a user. And I think for a majority of product managers in this group, this comes as no surprise, but this is just as a reminder that even if technology is cool, even if it's very impressive by what it does, if it doesn't solve the problem, it's unlikely that there is going to be a recurring success of that feature. And one of the problems that we set out to solve is users wasting their time accepting similar or identical suggestions that we had. And an example could be a spelling or a subject-verb agreement error. Like you kind of just make a typo or you forget a comma, and it's a no-brainer that you want to solve. So we wanted to help users spend the attention that they would have invested in reviewing these suggestions that are pretty obvious. And we wanted to save that time and let them focus on suggestions that would require their opinion and, formatting with the style or things like that. And those are suggestions that we also give, but users may want to review them more carefully because sometimes you want to remove a passive voice in your writing, but in other cases, you want to keep it. I know a lot of lawyers write with passive voice formatting. That's just the way they format their documents. It's an industry standard, so they would like to keep it. But at the end of the day, we know that everybody, regardless if you're a lawyer, a salesperson, a construction manager, whatever your role is, you probably want to have proper spelling and things like subject-word agreement and many others basic things that you want your writing to shine and look professional. So we focused on helping users save time on those basic things and focus more on the suggestions that we have to offer that are more advanced and that allow you to go beyond spelling and grammar and really focus on communication assistance. And like with any problem, we were asking ourselves, how will we know that we've succeeded with that? It's a long shot. It doesn't happen over a single release or just one day that you've released it and everybody suddenly communicates better and their lives have improved. Like we wanted to have a long-term measurements, like how is our model going to perform? Because it's like AI model that is going to evolve. And how is our product going to perform? So we looked at two key metrics. And again, a pretty common practice is you break it down into the business metric and you break it down into the technical metric. For business, we broke it down into the user retention. Like we knew that users were already joining the product, like they were coming into the product, they were using it. We wanted to make sure that they use it a lot more and they come on a regular basis and fix even more errors. And from a technical perspective, of course, we want to make sure that this uptime and loading performance of all the suggestions that we have to offer is up to the standard and nothing, we do no harm to the existing features. For ML specifically, this is like one of the hidden complexities of many artificial intelligence projects. When you have a model, it usually, it surfaces some information for a user. And there are two terms that you should be familiar with. It's a precision and the recall. One way to explain it is if you give me your email and I pretend to be a Grammarly service, I may find 10 different suggestions. And if they are not precise, only 5 suggestions may be relevant for you. So the precision will be like 50% or so. And if I do the recall, I can find 10 out of 10 of the possible suggestions. So like 10 out of 10. And the thing is, like, you always balance the two. The more suggestions you find, so the higher the recall is, the more likely some of the suggestions may be irrelevant. So you're always looking at this trade-off is like, do we want to find lots of suggestions and maybe surprise users by, the amount, but we have a risk of losing trust because some of them will be irrelevant? Or on the other hand, do we go for precision and maybe find less suggestions, but really surprise users by how relevant each suggestion is? And there is no right answer. Like really, like my personal opinion was we should go off after quality and only quality at the beginning and make sure that we don't lose users' trust. And the more data and insight into user behavior we can get later on, we can then increase the recall. But for your product, it could be different. Another example that I like to give is if you're starting with the movie suggestion service, your recall may be more important because users come in and they want to get a list of movie recommendations and see whatever you have to offer. So if you just offer 1 or 2 movies and none of them match the user's interest, you may lose a user. So just like that, you don't really have always there isn't clear-cut answer that precision is always better than recall. But something you have to be aware of is when you have this discussion with the team, you have to look at both metrics and talk to your teammates of what it's going to look like. The second important part is once you have the problem and you've defined the metrics, like with any metric, you need a benchmark, which basically means when we get a number, say it's 20%, just a random number, is this number for the feature better than what it used to be? And an interesting nuance with any new feature is there is no number to compare it against. So whenever you are launching something new, there is rarely a similar feature or behavior that you could say, now it's twice as good or twice as worse or something like that. So in our case, what we worked on is we looked at the 3 metrics that I have for you on the left side for activation, subsequent use, and accuracy. And we said, since we don't have anything to measure it against, let's build a very quick and simplest possible first version of the UI that you see on the right. So to give you a reminder, when you paste the text, we give you a list of suggestions. And among those suggestions, we're showing some that we think you can instantly fix. I made this mistake. I think a lot of product managers make it. It was you wanted to go for the best possible UI. I said, we should maybe skip the release of this version and go after the more elaborate UI that I will show you shortly that we knew was going to be better. But having this team discussion, we realized that if we go after the better and shinier UI that we think is going to gain more user trust immediately, we risk on 2 things. We will be missing out on early feedback that we can get pretty fast because we will be developing the shinier version for longer. And we will lose out on a benchmark so that when we release that shinier version, we will not know by how much better it has improved. So the second kind of takeaway is and it's kind of universal, not just for artificial intelligence projects, is you always want to have the first version as a benchmark so that you can compare it against it. That version should be the fastest and simplest implementation that you can. For our case, this was just one button that was instantly fixing things. We got metrics for activation, subsequent use, and accuracy, like I said, so that when we release the next version that you can see on the right, we now could compare. And one of the insights we had is, well, really, user trust was worse in the first version. We were asking users to blindly accept suggestions that not all of them were comfortable accepting, maybe. Some people didn't know what exactly was going to happen, so they really skipped on it. And we incorporated all of that feedback into our second version. So that's why you see right here a little bit actually much bigger screen, much bigger UI that has more details. It gives you more control over what's going to be fixed in how your text is going to be improved. And you can decide whether you accept all of them at once or you move on to work with individual suggestions later on. And again, this was a great insight because we had that first version as a benchmark. And when we were looking at it and hearing qualitative and quantitative feedback from people, we were yes, well, that's obvious. We've lost user trust with that one button. Now we can make it better. So the team was a lot more excited about we have very concrete problems we found in the first version that we're going to fix in the next one. And everybody was excited for the release. Speaking of the team that was working on this project and initiative, a very typical setup that I think a lot of you will be familiar with is you have always a front-end engineer, a back-end engineer, and a product designer and product manager. This is a very common group that is almost universal for mobile and web and native clients projects. when it comes to natural language processing, like ML products, like what we do, our team is usually growing by 3 more people that are kind of coming and joining at different stages, but they are instrumental to our success and release of very polished product. To give you a sense of what those additional roles do is ML engineer is focusing on quality of the model that we are building. So as a product manager, you will not know all the details about how the model works. And you sometimes look at it as a black box where you input data and gives you the result. So you really need someone who knows the ins and outs of that black box and all the rules, so that if something happens, if there is a mistake, if there is a false positive, or there is a recurring behavior that is, not acceptable, somebody can tweak that. And unless you have some other engineers that can do that, you slow down the release process for many of the new features and improvements. And that becomes risky because you sometimes don't really know why the model does what it does. And it becomes this black box that just magically works. In our case of working with the language, and what we do is natural language processing, we also have analytical linguists. Linguists know the language. They understand why people write what they write and what are the nuances of speaking English. And the person that comes to us from the analytical linguist team tries to analyze anonymized text samples, like little pieces of text, like they're not associated with any user or anything. It's just, statistics that helps us see if we actually made the right suggestion for the context that we were given. Did users say this was the right suggestion? And this really allowed us to go one step further and improve the quality of the model that was making those suggestions. So not just why it was making, but what suggestions it was making. And the data science is instrumental as well, because that person helps you connect the business metrics that we talked about, the technical metrics that happen, all into one place, and make sure that you're looking at it holistically and your product is actually making an improvement compared to other areas of how users engaged with the rest of the product. And since the team has grown and you now have more people working on different things, you may be answering like, so, well, what does the product manager then do, right? Like you've kind of given the responsibility of analyzing data to the data scientist. You are looking at the model with the analytical linguists and ML engineers. Designers are helping with the design. So as a product manager, like, what do you do? And it's a great question that I had the same question as we were going through the project. It was like, so what's left for me to do except for just, help the team to deliver this on time and make sure that, everybody knows what they're doing. And the thing that I learned is there is a lot more to do with the data and how you get the data so that your model works well. One thing that you have to be aware of, and I actually want to probably stay from this slide for one more minute, is not that you just need a high quality data and you need to think about where to get it, which we'll talk about in the next slide. You want to make sure that your data is diverse. And an example of that is a pretty unfortunate story that now became like this folk story, is when first voice assistants were developed, a lot of members on the team that worked in voice assistants were males, and they were using their own voice to train voice assistants to recognize commands. So if anybody was asking, what's the weather is like today, or what's in my calendar, those were the males on that team. And the model that was recognizing the voice and giving them the weather or the calendar got trained in the male's voice. And when the first versions of voice assistants got released into the real world, where the world is much more diverse, there are different voices, they're not all male voices, of course, the model had a hard time recognizing any other voice other than male. So like any female or just somebody who doesn't have like a lower tone or anything, or like any other voice that wasn't on the team, they had a very hard time recognizing that voice. And this speaks volumes to, once again, that the data diversity that you have is going to be instrumental to how you can scale and make your product useful for the real world. That's maybe why some voice assistants still have a hard time recognizing your voice. That's maybe why some face recognition software fails to detect the boundaries of your face, because their data that they were training their model on wasn't really up to the standards of the world's diversity. And to give you a sense of like, well, okay, that's interesting, Denis, right? Like you were saying, you need to get a lot of different data and you need to train on the data. Where do I get the data? And I'm kind of glad you asked, because there are at least 3 different avenues that you can explore. First of all, there is some publicly available data that you have. And to give you an example of some product that we can be building, like you and I can say, we need to detect different breeds of the dogs. Like we want to point the camera at a dog and find out if it's a husky or if it's a Shiba Inu. And one way to go about it is to go online and see if somebody has already annotated this, which means they took thousands of photos of different breeds and they put a label saying this is Shiba and this is husky. And that what may be the publicly available data. Like for instance, with emails, there is a famous, I think the company was called Enron, and they went bankrupt, and all of their email communication internally during the legal case was released publicly. So some models that learn to recognize emails and do suggestions for like how to write emails were trained on that data. Is it representative? Not really, because a lot of that is about like financial statements, but it's a good start. So as a second step, you can collect and annotate the data yourself. So you and I can take our phone, go out to the dog parks, take pictures of different dogs and put labels on them to say, this is Shiba, this is, husky, this is French bulldog, et cetera, et cetera. This is going to take a lot of time, but you can trust yourself that your data was properly annotated. And last but not least is like you can go out and purchase someone's annotation. So maybe somebody is a really like strong dog hobbyist and they like taking pictures of dogs and they've already did the work of taking all of those pictures and they annotated them for you. There isn't right answer that I could tell you, go and do data yourself or always use publicly available data, because it's really going to matter depending on what stage of the product you're on and how urgent the need for data is. I think it's fair to start with when you're like a little team, you can start with publicly available data to validate your ideas. Maybe later on when you're scaling your product, you want to annotate it yourself, but eventually you may need to work on or order services of other companies to do it at scale much faster. So it really comes down to what situation are you in and how urgently do you need the data? So in this case, you just have to find out for yourself which one of the 3 works best. And of course, the best practice would be to always monitor the qualitative and quantitative feedback from the users you get, regardless if it's a natural language processing product or if it's any sort of other AI. Users will always be giving you quantitative feedback in form of, feedback on on your UI or clicks, etc. But you also will be sharing some of the user stories. So you want to look out for that, because even if your AI is scaling for millions of users, there will be stories you need to take account for. And one way to quickly collect feedback is try to build it into the UI. Like at a certain point, we worked on a way to provide us feedback if our instant correction wasn't spot on. So users could say it was either looking good or they would revert it back to what it used to be before we corrected it. And this was one of the little details that really helped us collect more feedback and as a result, improve our model. So to put this all into the perspective of entire summary, like your team, whenever you will be working on an AI product, it's very likely that your team is going to grow and the data will become your new responsibility. And now that means you have to think about that and you have to explore avenues to collect more data, to annotate that data, and really share it with the team so that your model is improving. Your technical expertise for that is not really required, but I would say it's recommended. I once took a course on data annotation, how that happens and how the model is feeding in. And while I'm still not capable of doing all of that on my own, I'll very much appreciate the help of an ML engineer. At least we speak the same language, even though I don't know how to write the exact code that that person will write. So if you have a chance, that's worth exploring, but don't feel limited if you don't have that expertise right on. And what you really should think of is to always look out for balanced set of metrics for business and technical, but also quantitative and qualitative, because as appealing it is to have a model that is purely mathematical, it calculates the probabilities, you need to hear real people's voices, because at the end of the day, they are using your product, and that's how you can improve their experience overall. And it's kind of fun because your team grows and you now have more people to work with. So that, I think that's also a great benefit of larger projects. I think this is, we're slowly moving into the Q&A page. Before I sign off with my presentation, I wanted to call out our blog. This story earlier on was shared in a little bit more details on the blog. So if you are interested in hearing similar stories or reading other stories, our Engineering Digest is a good place to sign up. If I was maybe successful in convincing people and people got interested in this whole world of natural language processing and helping people improve lives by improving communication, I would be delighted if you check out our open vacancies page. I think it's filtered for European office already, so should make it easier to find any jobs relevant for you. And if you are way more interested in like meeting the people behind Grammarly who work at our Berlin office, we will be doing an Ask Me Anything session of online event in Berlin on October 11th. So if you are there, I will not be, unfortunately, but if you are there and you want to meet the rest of the team, they're even better than I am and have more interesting stories to share. So with that said, thank you for your attention. We'll now, I think, move on to the Q&A section, where I would be excited to see all of you and talk to you. If you have any thoughts, like of all the social media networks, I'm really only active on Twitter, so you can drop me a DM there and we can chat about any questions you have. So without further ado, I'll pass it back to Michelle and we'll move into the Q&A.
Thank you, Denis. That was an amazing presentation. So I'm just going to share my screen again. And yes, so before we start the Q&A session, you can just take some time, write your questions in the chat. We'll read your chat and bring the questions to Denis. And while you write your questions, I would also want to give you a brief overview of our use cases, about how and when you can engage us and how you can reach out to us, when would be the right time that we can come and help you. So first is the interim product manager or product leader. That's a permanent position, and that we can come handy when somebody from your team, especially a product manager, is going on a parental leave. We can cover for them for 3 to 12 months, depending on how much time you need us. Second is the product coach or consultant. We work as consultants as well, and we coach your product management teams to reach their next level. And not only that, we create and streamline processes from 0 to 1 at a large scale. Third is a product discovery lead. So we discover the next impactful initiative or products for your company, from market and user research to business model. And we can easily run a low or no code pilot or an MVP. Some of our B2B, B2C clients are Zalando, WeShare, OneFootball, Corali, DeepL, and many more. These are just a few just to fit in this slide. Here are a few more. You can also visit our website to see detailed case studies of the clients that we have worked with. And here is some, like not some, but just 1 or 2 feedbacks that we have received. And there are a lot more positive feedbacks that we have received from the clients we have worked with. So you can also check the testimonials there on our website. Talking about the product people stats, there's 71% of client retention rate, and there are 40 plus product leaders and product managers currently working in product people. who are always ready to serve you. And then the most interesting one is that there are 56% women in the team, which out of which 66% are in the leadership. This is our team. You can see we are from all around the globe and from different backgrounds here as a community ready to serve you. And we're always hiring. You can see our open positions on Greenhouse. The link would also be shared with you. And currently we're looking for product managers and senior product managers. Okay, so time for your questions.
I see we got one for how much time it took from conception to the first release of the feature, and asking for the time to understand. That's a great question, Zayat. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm trying. It's been a while since I looked at the specific dates for that feature. I think it was like almost a year ago. I know that we had our first prototype, that simple version that I used as a benchmark reference, in almost 1.5 months. I do have to note that we had some foundational blocks in the model, just because, how Grammarly works and all the other systems that do natural language processing. We could leverage that to do the first prototype. So it's not like we started from scratch. So we built the UI, connected with the model, and launched it to the limited subset of users, probably in 1.5 months. And since then, I think we had almost like 3 UI iterations, which in total took us almost 4 months. Yeah, I think 4 months, because I do remember like writing OKR for one of the quarters and saying we want to launch and validate it. And I remember there was another quarter when I said, now we have to put it into the proper maintenance. So really, I would say it's 4 months total. I think you can get something up and running in 1.5 months. I would say you have to account for us being a little bit bigger company. So there was a benefit of leveraging something that exists, but also there was a downside of making sure that everybody knows what we are doing. So that was a little set of meetings that we had to go through. Hope this answers the question.
Thanks, Denis. Okay, we have another question from friend on LinkedIn. He's saying, hi, Denis, how important is it to be technically sound to be a product manager?
Wow, that's my favorite question, because one thing that you learn to say as a product manager is like, it depends. And then you go on to elaborate about why it depends. So I would say it depends. I consider myself not to be a technical product manager at all. Like, I can read code. I may not understand all of it, but at least I'm going to be able to find where a certain like logic triggers, or maybe a copy of a title that goes on the screen. So I don't think that's being technical. And I think this is very much acceptable. Like, nobody expects you to write code if you're working on user-facing or like end-user features. There, I would say that design savviness is way more important, because you want to get a sense of what's a really delightful experience for a user. Like when I'm going to see it, is this going to be intuitive, or am I going to have questions and will churn from using this product? And the upside of that is, if you're just using technology any day, it's likely that you already have that design savviness. If you are using good products that teach your pattern recognition, your own ML model in your head for good design, you'll already have that savviness. So it's easier than technical savviness. I will say that there are certain roles, like I had to partner with one of the PMs for a certain period on this project, which was, he was a technical product manager, which meant that person was knowing the ins and outs of before we had an ML engineer, that person knew why the model does what it does, and they were really good at calculating the probabilities of when things will be accepted and not. So if I would known that, maybe we could have done it faster. But again, the benefit of having a diverse team, people can fill in those gaps in your knowledge. So I would say it's easier to find somebody who is technical already than to start and learn things from scratch on your own. And it's not like required that you know that.
Yeah, that was very well answered. Thanks, Dennis. Hassan wants to know some of the failed test cases when it comes to NLP and ML models. How do you deal with them? What kind of feedback you get from the users? And when the model does not perform as well or behave as anticipated, what do you do in that case?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think the first immediate feedback, and it's kind of almost universal, not just for natural language processing, is if some suggestion or prompt that you give to a user does not get engagement, meaning users don't click on it, they don't accept it, they don't review it, whatever, that's a first sign that your model may be underperforming. And a way to learn this is maybe user testing, or a more famous version of it, a corridor testing, when you just go out into the corridor room of your office and you find someone who hasn't worked on the product and you ask them to do one of the user flows. This will, it's important to find if the suggestion was wrong or if the UI is not intuitive. So as soon as you confirm that people actually understood the UI and they tell you something like, I actually don't think this is relevant, or, I actually think this, I would have written myself better. That's when your model is underperforming. Once you know that, I think you need to collect another great way that would require annotation, of course, is you could give it to real users and ask them to review what you suggest. And if they disagree, write the version that they would want to do. So this is, of course, a heavy lift task, but if it's worth, if it's the only way to improve your model, that's going to be worth it. You're going to get real world feedback from people, or better yet, maybe talk to journalists and editors, and they will do it for you so that this is, if editor of New York Times would have been editing this text, this is what it would look like. And that's how you train the model again. So you look at the examples of this is what our model did, and this is what the real person did. And as soon as they converge, if your model is suggesting what very similar to what the editor does, I would say you have a decent chance of success from launching that model. I think there was a second part of the question, how do you evaluate it? And was there a second part, Michelle?
Yeah, it was basically he wanted to ask, when the model does not perform as well as behave, or it doesn't behave as it is anticipated, what do you do in that case?
Yeah, I would say that part of going after the qualitative feedback and seeing what people react in the real world. So do a focus group. I think that's one of the ways to solve it.
Awesome.
I see that Elizabeth has her hand up.
I think somebody from Zoom.
Yes, I raised my hand. Yeah, hi, Denis. So I had a question. Did you have to take some courses or to upskill somehow for having, more knowledge about natural language processing and machine learning for the purposes, of your job?
Yeah, I took, I think I took two. One was on just data in general, and the other one was foundations of machine learning. I would say I have a hard time recommending going in for an expensive course, because I think when you get on the job, it's way faster to learn. It will be beneficial if you have time and you want to get your head in, your kind of get your foot in the door, and this can be an anchor. But in general, I think just doing it on the job is going to suffice as well. Don't feel like you have to take those courses. But two types of courses that I think will give you a sense is, if you ever try to do the course where you annotate your own data and trying to train a model from Google to recognize cats versus dogs, it's going to give you a sense of, oh, so that's how it works. That's what kind of data I needed to give. That's what annotation looks like. It's literally just labeled, right? You put an image and you put a text of, this is Shiba Inu and this is, cat. But once you do it by hand, you're oh, that's, for me, this was a bit of a revelation. It's oh, that's why when we ordered the data set and it took a week or so for people to annotate it, because it's really a lot of manual work. So that like data annotation is useful, I think. And just knowing, learning about models of different, because there are like tons of them. Like I can't even name all of them because I don't know all of them, but just knowing a sheer amount that exists going to give you a sense that there is no such thing as general artificial intelligence. Like as humans, we can drive a car, we can feed a baby, and at the same time do our work. And that's like general intelligence. We can do it all sometimes at once, right? Hopefully not driving a car. But as a computer, they can really do one thing at a time. Maybe they know how to feed a baby. Maybe they know how to drive a car. Maybe they know how to like write code or something, but you can't have a computer that does all three, and then definitely not at once. So knowing the limitations of, like artificial intelligence theory and like what an ML, machine learning is in general, is useful. And again, I don't think I'm an expert in all of that. It's just like something continuous learning, which I think is great in the community that you do, where people share stories.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you, Lisa and Denis. One last question before we can wrap up the call. So there's a question from Mark on LinkedIn. He's asking, how would you evaluate the technologies that can be used for an early stage NLP startup?
How would I evaluate the technologies? So I'm gonna, that was a question from Mark, right?
Yeah.
So Mark, if I'm going in the wrong way to answer this, please specify and put me back. But I think one way to answer this is, should we build something on ourselves, like in-house solution versus going after the market-ready solution? GPT-3 had a lot of hype. I think it was last year when they first got released to public and in beta. I do think if you're starting from scratch, lots of companies like that will have ready solutions for you. And my general suggestion would be like, it's totally fine using them and doing a prototype, because that's the whole point of those solutions that are ready outside the box. I would say that it will never be as flexible and as customizable, at least until for now, as your own solution that you built for your own needs. That's why whatever we do within our team on Grammarly is going to be way more suited for the needs and users that we have. So it's, again, a trade-off of, it's fine starting with what's already available and, prototyping. I do think eventually you'll get in the mode where you either use a hybrid version, maybe some model from publicly available, then built in your own, or fully move into your own world of models. So Mark, if that's not what you were looking for, let me know. I'll try to answer that.
Yeah. Thank you, Denis. Mark, you can just leave your comment if you think you need more detail. We have a few more minutes. I think we can take one more question. That is from Vijay. So Vijay is asking okay, I'll just rephrase it just so that everybody can understand. How can we engage the end customers in any digital product?
Oh, wow. That's really, I don't think it has anything to do with even like natural language processing per se. How can we engage user? It just, I'm having this like rainbow of ideas of like, this really depends on who is your user and if you know the problem you're solving for them. Because one obvious thing is, if you know your user and if you know the problem you're solving for them, you probably want to find them where they complain or think of like situation where they think about that problem. If you have a student who is writing an essay, they stress out about getting a bad grade on that essay, they may go online on essay help forums or like some other ways to ask for help. You want to put a post up on your own writing, share a link to a blog, or run an ad campaign where users will notice your product, because that's where their need is most acute. That's when they feel the stress, and that's when they will be inclined to test different solutions. I think you can even go out on the street and ask people for early feedback on the prototype. Surprisingly, that still works. You just have to be ready for a certain number of rejections, because in that case, you really don't know if that person walking towards you is your target user, or that you're solving their problem or not. So they may just say, I'm busy, I'm on my commute, please don't interrupt me. But I think that, you know, knowing the problem and knowing the context of a user will help you find them with information about your product in the right place and time.
Yeah, I think you answered it well, although it was a very general question, but thanks, Denis. Okay, so I think we can wrap up now. Thank you everyone who has joined us from all the platforms. Thank you, Denis, for giving an amazing talk. We really enjoyed it, and I'm pretty sure we'll get amazing feedback even after this call. That's all from our side.